Season 21. You know, every summer we work really hard to reinvent ourselves, focusing on how we can better respond and connect with you, the viewer. Now, we have always let your questions drive our content. And boy, oh boy, have those questions changed dramatically like I have never seen before. So this season, we are answering your questions in a whole new way by turning our studio audience into an on-stage, fully participating focus group. That's why you guys are up here instead of out there. Everyone here has an opinion, and I welcome it. That's how we learn, by listening to one another. I'm committed to being part of the solution in these divisive times, and I have to tell you, it's season 21, and I have never been more excited since season 1. And that brings us to our topic today. It may be one of the most hot, divisive topics in the entire country. I'm talking about the debates concerning abortion. Now, I just said hello to our guests, Nancy and Shedrick, who found themselves thrust into the spotlight when Nancy received a devastating diagnosis about her pregnancy and then was denied the right to terminate that pregnancy.
More than 2 months after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, the fight over abortion rights continues.
Louisiana is one of 11 states with the nation's toughest abortion laws. Other surrounding states have similar restrictions. Nancy Davis has 3 children and planned for 1 more.
We were elated that we were expecting another child.
But happiness turned to heartbreak. Earlier this month, the fetus was diagnosed with acrania, a rare condition in which the skull doesn't develop. The prognosis is grim. Most are either stillborn or die soon afterwards. Doctors advised Davis to terminate her pregnancy, but Women's Hospital in Baton Rouge later denied her from getting the procedure. Attorney Ben Crump pointed to Davis's case as an example of Louisiana's vague and confusing laws regarding which abortions are now allowed.
Ms. Davis was among the first women to be caught in the crosshairs of confusion due to Louisiana's rush to restrict abortion, but she will hardly be the last.
The only thing that could replay in my head was I was carrying my baby to bury my baby.
The choice is to travel far or carry a fetus that's likely not viable to term.
Well, today, Nancy and her partner, Shedrick, are speaking out for the first time since they had to leave their home state in order to get a legal abortion. Knock, knock.
Hello,
Nancy,
Dr.
Shedrick,
Phil.
it's good to see you guys.
Nice to see you as well.
Well, I'm glad you're here. Nancy, I understand that you've been to New York, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And when did you go?
Thursday, I had the operation done, the procedure done.
And how many weeks were you at that point?
16 weeks and 3 days.
How far along were you when you got the news that the baby was so compromised?
10 weeks.
10 weeks?
Yes, sir.
And I'm so sorry to hear that, by the way.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And at 10 weeks, did the doctors advise you at that point that you should terminate the pregnancy?
Well, we discussed options, and they advised us to terminate.
The condition, they told you it was what?
Acrania.
Acrania?
Yes, sir.
You were kind of in a situation where there was nowhere, anywhere near your home that you could go, right?
Yes, sir.
And that's why you went to New York.
Yes, sir.
How did you feel once it was behind you?
You know, I felt like we made the best decision for our baby as well as ourselves. It's still taking an emotional toll on me.
Imagine,
I have problems sleeping at night. I have problems eating. You know, it's very, very emotionally draining.
Yeah. We're going to talk to you some more here in just a few minutes, but I just wanted to take a minute to say hello.
Okay.
All right. Talk to you in a minute.
Thank you.
The couple wanted some separation for what could potentially be a really heated debate today on the abortion issue that is dividing our country. They don't really want to be in the crosshairs of this national debate, but they do want to be here to speak up on behalf of people that can often be caught in their situation. So Nancy and Shedrick are now joining us from the green room. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Their lawyer, one of the most notable civil rights attorneys in the country, and a dear friend of mine, Ben Crump, is also here with me. So, Ben, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Dr. Phil. Thank you.
Ben, what a wonderful couple.
Certainly, Dr. Phil, they're salt of the earth American citizens who, because of what's happening in our country, found themselves in just a God-awful predicament. After the Supreme Court ruled in Dobbs v. Jackson, overturning the long-established precedent of Roe v. Wade, Louisiana was one of the first states to immediately institute draconian laws that said, Holly, no matter what the situation is, a woman cannot choose to get an abortion, even if the doctors told her that there was 99.9% chance that her baby would die in minutes after it came through her womb. And I understand, Dr. Fielding, you're a mental health expert. I cannot imagine the mental anguish of a woman who has to deliver a baby that she sees come out of her, and then they pronounce it dead.
Nancy, even though they told you and Shedrick that you should terminate this pregnancy, they refused to do it out of fear of prosecution for violating Louisiana law. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
What did they say?
Yes, sir. Well, they basically told us that because of the overturning of the Roe versus Wade, that they were not able to do it. Therefore, we had been denied for the medical procedure and that we would have to travel out of state.
This was a wanted pregnancy. You have 3 other children.
Yes, sir.
You guys wanted a 4th. What was that 6 weeks like for you and for Shedrick, but particularly for you having to carry on with this pregnancy for 6 additional weeks?
It was extremely traumatizing. It was mentally draining in all aspects. It was physically draining, emotionally draining. You know, very, very emotionally draining. Very much so. You know, this has been the most difficult decision that we've ever had to make in our entire life.
And Shedrick, this was hard for you to watch. It was hard for you to go through, and it was hard for you to watch what she was going through.
Yes, sir. I mean, because as a man, you know, our natural instinct is to want to fix things and, you know, be able to resolve the issue. But this was something that was much bigger than us. You know, it's taken a toll on me as well, but I'm very sympathetic and empathetic to Nancy and the effect that it has on her.
Yeah. Now, why is Louisiana's abortion law causing so much confusion? When we come back, we're going to talk to Ben and the Louisiana senator who wrote the legislation that was at the center of Nancy's story is going to speak with us. We'll talk to her and hear Ben's take on all of this right after the break.
People say Louisiana law forced this. It was not Louisiana law. It was overzealous physicians.
These doctors were saying, if I do this and some politician wants to make a point, then my life is in jeopardy.
I can't tell you how many people I've had say, don't do it. Don't talk about this. But I'm going to talk about this, a national issue that every parent needs to pay attention to.
The last thing he had to do to get into the fraternity was to drink a lot of alcohol.
911, what is your emergency? Oh my God, oh my God.
I resolved to find a way to make all of you an even bigger part of what we do here. We've got to get that part of this across and get it done. I could think of no better way than to bring our studio audience right up here on stage.
The defunding plan has failed. It's a complete disaster.
People will do desperate things in order to survive. You're not solving anything by arresting those people.
We're not trying to win an argument. We're trying to solve a problem. Are we keeping people alive when we shouldn't? Because we have the technology to do so.
When medicine is used to cause the death, that isn't dying, it's killing.
The arrogance of that statement.
Thousands of young women who have moved their breasts and now regret it. None of these procedures will change someone's gender.
I'm going to stop you from embarrassing yourself right there. Pure misinformation.
Customers seem to be losing their cool at the drop of a hat. What the hell is going on? It is the #1 issue on everyone's mind. I'm talking about inflation. Oh, we're going to talk about that.
10 weeks into my pregnancy, I found out I had a rare birth defect called a crania. The doctors told me that my baby would die shortly after birth. They told me that I should terminate the pregnancy because of the state of Louisiana's abortion ban. They could not perform the procedure. They said I had to carry my baby to bury my baby. This is not fair to me, and it should not happen to any other woman.
Nancy says they made the difficult decision to abort based on her doctor's advice. But her attorney, Ben Crump, says the state of Louisiana's vague and confusing abortion laws, which triggered immediately after Roe versus Wade was overturned, prevented her from proceeding with the medical advice. Now, joining us virtually is Senator Katrina Jackson of Louisiana, who was one of, if not the author of the abortion legislation for her state. Now, she hopes to bring some clarity to the law. Senator Jackson, it's an honor to have you here today. Thank you so much for taking the time.
And thank you, Dr. Phil. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person. I still practice law for a living.
And Senator Jackson, this is a tragic diagnosis for this family. And I understand that when this law was written, you were the primary author of the law. Is that right?
I was, but let me say this. There was no rush to write this law. I am the primary author of some changes to this law. Louisiana's abortion trigger has been in place since 2006. My law wasn't set to take effect until August the 1st, which added the exception that we're talking about now, the medical futility exception. When I first brought my bill, I didn't bring it to add an exception. One of my main goals was that the 2006 trigger law criminalized women who sought an abortion after Roe versus Wade, because I'm always empathetic to women, regardless if they don't agree with my position or not. That was one of the main goals, to make sure women were not criminalized. When the bill went to the other side, it was added in the process, the medical futility exception. So when people say Louisiana law forced this, it was not Louisiana law. It was overzealous physicians, and I respect them, who refused for 3 or 4 days to take the advice of the Louisiana Department of Health that the exception was in place. So I'm not sure how much clearer it could be. The bill was written because we wanted to ensure there was no confusion.
But Ben, the physicians, they did not want to do this, right?
They did not want to put themselves in what they thought was a political tug of war. Had they did this procedure, they feared, when you read the law on its face, that if you knowingly perform an abortion, that you could be sentenced to 10 to 15 years in prison, have to pay a fine of $20,000 to $200,000, and you lose your medical license. So these doctors were saying, well, hold on. if I do this and some politician wants to make a point, then my life is in jeopardy, literally. And that seems to be what's causing all the problems. These doctors are hesitating on giving medical care because the politicians have said that we're telling you what you can do, and they don't want to get caught in the crosshairs.
Senator, were they afraid of the medical care getting criminalized?
I'm not sure because I don't know what their train of thought was. What I do know is that within 3 to 4 days, LDH reached out to them. Our Attorney General put out a statement that a physician that performs this procedure, whether I agree with it or not, because I'm whole life, right, would not be criminalized. At that point, I believe, and Mr. Crump probably would have more information, from what I understand, they began to reach out to Ms. Nancy in an attempt to perform the procedure. I don't think there was ambiguity in law. I think it was more of physicians' reading of the law.
What was your understanding, Nancy?
Initially, we were denied. They reached out to us weeks later. And at that particular time, the trust had been lost. You know, I didn't have any trust in them anymore for them to even perform the procedure. If y'all can't understand the rule and interpret that to where they could have assisted me or whatever, then I don't trust them to do anything else.
When we come back, after 50 years living in a pro-choice world, what does our world look like now? We're going to add 2 women who see it very differently. We'll be right back.
Nancy, that's the fundamental point here, is that we're talking about a baby. We're talking about a human life.
A lot of people have been told credit's evil. If you open up a credit card, it's going to destroy your score. Absolutely false.
From credit card and travel hacks to cashing in on those well-deserved rewards.
Wow, I am blown away by this already.
With points guy Brian Kelly.
So not only are you raking in points, taking trips, but you're getting lower mortgage rates. The 2 biggest factors of your FICO score are...
I've Got a Secret with Robin McGraw. Available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
State abortion laws create a lot of confusion. Now, doctors are becoming increasingly concerned.
When medicine is criminalized, physicians are scared to do the jobs they're trained to do.
If someone who's pregnant comes in after getting in a car accident, are doctors going to be afraid to take them to surgery because there is a chance that you could inadvertently cause an abortion?
This is government getting in between the relationship of a patient and their doctor, and doctors don't know what to do.
Now, the abortion debate has really divided people around the world, certainly around the United States, splitting into 2 basic groups. I mean, it's on a continuum, even within the groups, but 2 basic groups, pro-choice and pro-life. Now, today, we're going to hear from both sides. Pro-choice advocate Christian Nunez is the president of the National Organization for Women, now fully supports the safe and legal abortion. And pro-life activist Lila Rose is president and founder of Live Action, a nonprofit anti-abortion organization. And I know that you probably have feelings about this going into it. I'm sure you do, those of you at home and those of you here. I just ask everyone to really have an open mind and open heart about this. And I always encourage people to approach these things, even though you have some feelings about it, with some authentic curiosity. If you can really try and understand why the other side feels the way they do, at the same time you try to get them to understand the way you feel the way you do, then there's a chance to have some empathy and understanding for each other's side instead of demonizing each side, because that's not going to get us anywhere. So, Christian, I'll ask you, do you believe in Nancy's case? And if a Louisiana doctor was to perform the abortion, then should they be protected from prosecution?
Dr. Farrell, I absolutely believe that they should be protected from prosecution. Part of their role as providers is provide the best care for their patients and to look out for their best interests. And so as Nancy went and was looking, and she clearly said it, that she lost trust into the system in Louisiana because of the experiences she had. So therefore, you know, doctors should not have to be feeling like they're going to lose their license if they're going to administer a human right, which is part of abortion care and reproductive care.
And I can tell you that the senator was talking about a provision that didn't list acrania as one of the conditions, but effective August 1st of 22, Chapter 4, medically futile pregnancy conditions, the number 25, a profound and irremediable congenital or chromosomal anomaly existing in the unborn child that is incompatible with sustaining life after birth in reasonable medical judgment is certified by 2 physicians that are licensed in the state of Louisiana. That is, although acrania is not listed, that is the provision that covered this in that circumstance, right, Senator?
Yeah, yes, it is. And I don't want to take credit for it. I did not add it. I sought to decriminalize women in amending the 2006 statute, but it does cover it. I don't concur, though, with anyone that says the law is ambiguous because you just read it.
Now, Lily, what do you think? You don't think Nancy should have been able to have an abortion?
I mean, Nancy, my heart broke when I heard your story because that's the worst thing any mom wants to hear is that their baby is going to die. Their baby has a life-threatening illness. My husband and I, we had a miscarriage about 2 years ago. They were some of the darkest days of my life. And they were dark days because it was our child. You know, we knew this was a baby. And I think that's the fundamental point here is that we're talking about a baby. We're talking about a human life. And the pro-life position is that all humans have human rights. And the first right is life, to not be killed. You know, from the moment of fertilization until natural death. And so, you know, Nancy, you deserve better. You deserve better health care. There's perinatal hospice, there's palliative care, so that your baby could die in the loving arms of their parents instead of at the abortionist tools.
Okay, I've got some questions for you about that, and we've got to take a break, and then Ben has an important point to make. Coming up, should the government dictate what a woman can do with her body? That's a big question. And when does life begin? You define that as at the point of fertilization, right?
Well, that's science. It's not my opinion. The science is clear when human life begins at the moment of fertilization.
Well,
and
that's the
all
question.
humans have human rights is our position.
That's the question I've got for you. We'll talk about all that when we come back.
A right has been taken away from us. And what is next?
I want to address that because our fundamental human right that we all share in this room is life. And you have the right to not be killed.
There's nothing you could justify to say that she should have to carry it to bury it.
Dr. Caitlin Bernard, a local OBGYN physician, performed an abortion on a 10-year-old girl who was a victim of rape. The girl traveled from Ohio, where most abortions are illegal.
How concerned are physicians now about potentially being in legal jeopardy?
Well, they're incredibly concerned.
Ohio is one of at least 9 states which make no exceptions for rape or incest. In Indiana, abortions are still legal up to 22 weeks.
Should a 10-year-old rape survivor be able to get an abortion? Now, pro-choice advocate Christian Nunez says absolutely, yet pro-life advocate Lila Rose says the fetus is not the guilty party. Those are two very strong opinions. Ben, you have an important point to make.
Dr. Phil, we must understand something that is critically important to all Americans. As a civil rights lawyer, this is the first time in history that a right has been taken away from individual citizens. In this instance, the right for a woman to choose. And so you really have to be concerned about this, because you had the 3 latest Supreme Court judges who were appointed by President Trump all said during their confirmation that they were disinclined to disturb this precedent, this well-established precedent. One of them said super precedent of Roe v. Wade. But yet they all came and voted to overturn Roe v. Wade. And this is very frightening when you think about it, because what is next?
I see a lot of my audience wiggling in their chairs. If you've got something to say, raise your hand.
Great, I do. I have lots to say, actually. A ton to say, actually.
Okay.
I would say, though, in this particular case with Nancy, who I feel absolutely terrible for, Lila, I really feel like your views, you just want to legislate evil. That's really how it feels when I hear you speak, especially when you're talking about a 10-year-old girl who was raped. I'm sorry. And to hear you say that, you know, they should just have it anyway is disgusting. I really think you're a traitor to your own, and I will never be able to agree with you. There's nothing you could justify to say that she should have to carry it to bury it. There is nothing you could possibly say to justify that level of lack of empathy. And that's the problem I feel like in this country at the moment. We were founded on the lack of empathy, and we've just kept up with that tradition. If you have no empathy.
Abortion is devastating to women's mental health. No one talks about that. The year after a woman has an abortion,
it's really like
the year after a woman
to have the child. What kind of trauma is that?
The trauma is from the rape.
Somebody?
The trauma is from the rape. The child's an innocent party there.
The child isn't born yet. It's not there.
We should not take out generational sin on a child to say there's generational sin and that dad was an abuser, so the child should be killed. That's not fair to the child.
We're talking about rights, and he just said a right has been taken away from us. And what is next?
I want to address that, because our fundamental human right that we all share in this room is life. It's the first human right. Laws are meant to protect the weak. In a society, who's the weakest? Who's the weakest in the society? A child.
The poorest.
They don't have a voice. They can't speak. A child in the room.
That's
or
a weak.
But a poor child would be the weakest.
Them that way by
and a child with disability. Listen, whether you live 10 minutes or 10 years or 100 years, you're a human life, and you have the right to not be killed. And that's what the pro-life fight is all about. That's what we're fighting for, a culture of life where we provide real health care. You know, abortion is the intentional destruction of an innocent human life.
But doesn't a woman
have a
right to choose that for herself?
A right to choose what? A right to choose what?
Doesn't a woman have a right to choose what happens to her body?
But what's in her body? There's another life we're talking about. Let's acknowledge the science.
And I would defer to Christian and the experts, but I will say this. You can't just be pro-fetus and not pro-life.
Right.
Because a lot of times what we see...
We're pro-human beings. We're pro-human beings. And women deserve better than abortion. A lot of these children are born,
all those legislators who vote for pro-life when the baby's inside the woman then do nothing to vote to help them with health care, after-school care, you know, daycare, all these things, especially in marginalized communities.
In the back row, in the middle.
I'm Corinne. You say you're pro-life, but banning abortion hurts so many more people in the long run. So many more people. If you were really pro-life, you would be caring about these long-term ripple effects, about the 10, 12-year-olds that get raped and they could possibly die because their body isn't developed yet, the babies that come out and could be severely underdeveloped, me who gets raped. You know, why is it that you're telling me that I can only get an abortion if I get raped? You're telling me that I only get to have a choice over my body if I get violated. How is that fair?
What we do is we fight for all lives. That's what the pro-life movement is actually about. It is a civil right. We have to defend all life. All life is protected from the moment of conception. That happens when a sperm and an egg meet. There's a little spark of life that happens.
Okay.
Can I respond?
You can.
Yes,
we have to take a break, and then I'll let Ben respond, and then I have a question for Lila. When we come back, Christian says there's no equity in a pro-life argument. I'm going to ask her what she means by that when we come back.
Hate crimes in the U.S. rose last year to the highest level in more than a decade.
You're so Asian. I like you.
How long did this go on?
For more than an hour. Unfortunately, it turned into an assault on both of my parents. It gets worse, Dr. Phil.
We've got video evidence of this, so of course he would be arrested. That did not happen, did it? That's tomorrow. Then on Thursday,
I just started screaming her name, but I never heard anything back.
The police officers, we failed you.
lock up your guns where they cannot get to them. That's Thursday. Closed captioning.
The Supreme Court ending constitutional protection for abortions by overturning Roe v. Wade.
When Roe v. Wade was overturned, a number of states had abortion bans ready to take effect. Trigger laws in 13 states banned abortion immediately or soon after Roe was repealed, meaning the federal ruling triggers a state law banning abortion to go into effect. Some states are already seeing legal challenges to their trigger laws, and there are more lawsuits likely to follow.
No one here is pro-death, and no one here is pro-abortion. The difference is pro-choice and pro-life. Lila, you say some things in the predicate of your positions that life begins at fertilization, that science is very clear about that. And you have to know science isn't, there's no consensus among the scientific community.
There is, Dr. Phil. 96% of scientists say that life begins at fertilization. If you're an in vitro specialist, you're looking to create a single-cell embryo, and then you know you have a new human life. So it is a scientific fact.
Well, actually, it's not.
Well, when do you say human life begins then?
It doesn't matter what I think. I don't care what I think. What I'm saying is the scientific community does not have a consensus about when life begins.
It's simply inaccurate. It's simply inaccurate.
That's not true. You can go to the body.
A single-cell embryo is a unique new human life.
You can go to the body of scientific literature, and you can find neuroscientists who say that it begins when there is a detectable brainwave.
But Dr. Phil, in an abortion, if it's not a human life, why do you have to kill it?
I haven't spoken over you, and you keep speaking over me, and I assume that's because you don't want me to finish my thought, which is, if anyone here wants to fact check me instead of speak over me, you can go to the scientific literature and query what the definition is of the beginning of life, and you will find that there are different definitions. And it's up to you to decide what you think, but there is not a consensus among the scientific community, and it has actually evolved across time. Before we had sonograms, it was a black box what was going on in there. Then when we got to the point we had sonograms and we could see, oh, you can detect a heartbeat, okay, now, up until then, it was referred to as quickening, when you could feel the kick. That was the beginning of life, and then we got better technology, and then it started to change. But you say it's at fertilization, but at fertilization, there actually hasn't been implantation. And then once there's implantation, then this is a process. And all I'm saying is there's not a consensus, and you're saying there is, and that's factually inaccurate.
We can agree to disagree, but I will say, you know, when I was
pregnant... But the literature doesn't disagree.
Well, we should look it up. It's 96% of scientists have agreed when surveyed. But regardless of that point, I think the question is, you know, we know deep down when you're pregnant, there's a new human life. You know, that's why it's so devastating for Nancy. Our miscarriage was so devastating. We all know that deep down. These are human beings. That's why it's so contentious. And listen, do we acknowledge that all humans have human rights? Because I think what your question is about is about personhood. I agree with a lot of your
points. I'm just saying it comes down to when that life begins.
But I don't think Nancy or others here are saying they're not human beings.
Layla, the real argument here we're having is about choice and a person's right to choose what is best for them regarding family planning, what is best for them regarding their bodies and their ownership. And when we are listening to this debate, we're constantly getting back to about who's deciding what. If you determine for yourself that's when life begins, that is fine for you. But someone else may determine something completely different. And this is where, from a pro-choice standpoint, we're saying it is not for us to decide for anyone what they believe, how they believe, but they have options. So I think we need to really pay attention to what pro-choice is really arguing and what we're really talking about. It's about truly, if we're giving people the right to choose, we're allowing them to make the best decisions for themselves, for their bodies, and for their family.
Okay, I have to take a break. When we come back, we'll clear up the myth about taxpayer money paying for an abortion. Well, get ready for November because abortion rights will become a focal point at the ballot. Now, it's up to you, the voter, to determine how your state will impose these bans, because what this did was basically send this to the states to make a decision. And a lot of them had trigger laws that as soon as Roe v. Wade was overturned, they had laws ready to go, and they went, straight into action at that point. So this is going to be a real hot button in the midterms, right? Yep. You were wanting to say something right before we went to break.
Thank you, Dr. Phil. Two quick things, and I'm so glad we're having this conversation. The first thing is this. Abortion advocates have decided when life begins in their book. It's at birth. They say before birth, it's not a child, doesn't have human rights, can be killed at will for any reason, and then after birth, it magically becomes a human. That's not logical. That's not scientific. We know that human life begins before birth. It doesn't begin at birth. So that's the first thing. The second thing is a question for you, Christian, would be this. The National Organization for Women, my understanding, your organization supports abortion up until the moment of birth for any reason, taxpayer funded. Is that your position?
Well, we believe people have a right to choose.
Up until the moment of birth for any reason.
It's not for our organization or myself or anyone else or advocate to determine where they determine that point is for them and regarding the gestational age of when they seek an abortion care. So it's very important to point that out. And as for regarding funding sources, right now there is a Hyde Amendment that's in place, and the Hyde Amendment only provides Medicaid funding for abortions under extreme circumstances, incest, rape, and some very few medical issues where it's concerning for the life of woman or the fetus. It's a financial cost on the person who is choosing to move forth their planning and what they do. It is not covered a lot of times under federal funding. Taxpayers are not always paying for this.
Just to clarify,
do taxpayers sometimes pay for it?
It does. In California, it does.
Depends on the state, but some states do have where they use their funds for their state.
But just to clarify, this is a really important point. The abortion position, the position of now your organization, is abortion up until the moment of birth for any reason. It's an extraordinary position, and that's built on this idea of dehumanizing the child in the womb, which is what the abortion position has done. It's saying they're not a human, if they're conceived in violence, if they have a disability, if they're really sick, kill them. That's the abortion position. And the pro-life position is saying treat them like a human being.
Let me correct
treat
your
them with
position
dignity.
on now. Our position is to keep abortion legal.
Through all 9 months of pregnancy, is that correct?
Our position is to keep abortion legal.
Anybody else? Yes, sir, in the back, right here. Go ahead, sir.
Hi. What is troubling me is the idea of government-mandated pregnancy.
Can I respond to that?
That's in the end, that's what's happening.
No one is forcing anyone to get pregnant.
Motherhood is slavery.
I get really nervous when the government gets into people's personal lives. I've said that when people come in and say, you know, we have problems deciding the custody of our kids, so we're going to go to court. And I go, oh, you don't want to do that. You would be much smarter to sit down and work this out between yourselves, because you have no idea what the court may do or not do. You don't want the government in your lives. And I really don't think the government needs to be telling people what they should do with their bodies. We're out of time. Don't worry. This is just too important. So let me say goodbye for now. I want to thank Nancy and Shedrick for sharing their story. I've said it before, but Nancy and Shedrick, I'm so sorry for your loss. I hate that. I hate that you had to go through that, and I thank you for your courage to come here and talk about this today. And I want to thank all of my guests. A special thanks to my good friend, civil rights attorney Ben Crump, President of the National Organization for Women, Christian Nunez, and President of Live Action, Lila Rose. Thank you for being here. There's so much more to talk about, and we will just have to do this in another hour of conversation that you will see very soon. For more information about today's episode, if you'd like to share your story, log on to drphil.com. And if you want to add your voice to the conversation, you know where to find me on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all of that. If you're in the Los Angeles area or you plan to be, we'd love to have you join us here on stage in our studio audience. Just go to my website, drphil.com, click on Be Part of the Audience for all the details. Don't forget to follow and subscribe to my podcast, Fill in the Blanks. I talk about just this kind of issue in real depth there, and other issues, obviously, that are facing